Good evening,
Okay.
everybody. We're just going to give it a few minutes and give folks a chance to get logged on here, and then we'll get started. So, just a couple minutes. Well, it looks like we've leveled off. We'll go ahead and get started. So, afternoon, everybody, or evening, I guess already. My name's Kelly Cunningham. I'm the director of the fish program here at WDFW, and welcome to our initial town hall meeting to kind of kick off the upcoming coastal steelhead season planning effort. Before we get started, just want to share that uh, within the last hour, we've been made aware of a tragedy that happened on the Bogus Shield to include some fatalities. Don't have a whole lot of detail, but just the fact that folks were out fishing and enjoying themselves and um, are no longer with us weighs heavy on us, and just wanted to acknowledge the loss and let folks who may know the people who were involved in the accident. We're thinking about you. We're thinking about their families, and sad deal. That said, we got some work to do tonight. We want to share with you where we're at in terms of the steelhead forecast. Want to talk a little bit about our rulemaking process, and then we want to spend time, as we always do, hearing from you all with any questions or comments that you might have. Um, Gonna turn it over to Leah. Well, maybe before I do that, for those of you who haven't participated in one of these before, we started these town hall meetings. I think it was back in 2020, as we were facing some pretty significant challenges with returns. Things have gotten a little better some years and a little worse other years, but we've kept these town hall meetings each year in place just to make sure that you all have the information that we have and are able to help inform the decision making around regulations. It's a little different this year in that we're currently in a process to revise our coastal steelhead regs. If you've been paying attention to that, we've had a number of town hall meetings. We've been in front of the commission a couple times, and we're going to be in front of the commission for a decision here in the middle of next month. The purpose of that effort was to have our permanent regulations better align with the fisheries that we put in place the last few years. But we'll talk a little bit about that, and then, like I said, we'll have some opportunities for y'all to ask us any questions or weigh in. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Leah, who's going to walk us through our Zoom etiquette, and then turn it over to Chad to introduce the team and walk through the information. So, again, thanks for being here, and I'll turn it over to Leah. Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you, Kelly. Many of you heard my spiel for the last few years, but for those who have not, all callers will be muted upon entry. Ask a question by raising your hand. If you're calling in, you can raise a hand by dialing *9 on your phone. If you're calling from a computer, you can find the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. When you are called on for a question or comment, we encourage you to speak up and provide comments live. To speak, you will need to unmute yourself by using the mute button on your computer or mobile device, or by entering *6 if you're calling from a landline. If you have technical issues during the webinar, please drop us a note in the chat and we will help you through it. Be respectful of others. Be tough on the issues and questions, not on people or organizations. No personal attacks, insults, or threats. Listen and assume positive intentions from those speaking. Speak and act professionally. No offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity. Share questions or comments in written format online at wdfw.wa.gov/coastal-steelhead. Okay, Chad.
Thank you, Leah. Good evening. My name is Chad Herring, and I am the Region 6 Fish Program Manager. With me here tonight is Dr. Aaron Whitcock, the South Coast District Biologist, Mike Sharp, Anadromous Resources Policy Analyst, but tonight presenting on the Mid-Coast District, and Catherine Sutton, the North Coast District Biologist. As Kelly mentioned, just want to take a moment and thank everyone for taking time away from their lives and families to be here tonight and to help us as we plan for 2025-26 winter steelhead fisheries. Our presentation tonight will start with some background information on coastal steelhead. We will then cover the timeline for our annual co-manager planning process for winter fisheries. The biologist will present recent year escapement and harvest estimates and the forecast for all coastal steelhead populations. They will also cover our proposed regulations for the season, which will be our starting point in negotiations with our co-managers. We'll do a quick summary and then wrap up with plenty of time for questions on the material we presented. And what we'd really like to hear is any thoughts and suggestions you all might have about winter steelhead fisheries for the upcoming season. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start off and provide everyone here with just a little background to set the stage around coastal steelhead as we begin discussing fisheries for the upcoming winter season. Coastal steelhead populations in recent years have experienced decreased abundance and productivity from historic levels. This has resulted in many of those populations being below escapement objectives. Beginning in 2019, the co-managers were proactive in responding to these observations and made significant reductions to fisheries, including full closure in some years. Also, there is currently a petition to list coastal Washington steelhead under the Endangered Species Act. A scientific review team was convened and a report was finalized in late 2024 that indicates that these populations were at a moderate risk of extinction, and we expect a listing determination later this year or early next year. Lastly, our estimates for the 2024-25 steelhead return indicate most areas were below expectations relative to forecast and escapement objectives. Next slide, please. Next, wanted to talk a little about what guides WDFW's management of steelhead and steelhead fisheries. That guidance can be found in our statewide steelhead management plan, which was put into place in 2008. The purpose of the plan is to provide the policies, strategies, and actions that will restore and maintain the abundance, distribution, diversity, and long-term productivity of Washington's wild steelhead. The plan directs staff to implement regulations that protect wild stocks, account for total mortality of fisheries that impact steelhead, and to utilize a 10% release mortality rate on caught and released fish. In an effort to achieve those actions, the following objectives are identified in the plan and are relevant to these coastal steelhead populations. First, manage to meet the wild management objective and hatchery broodstock goals. The plan provides guidance to minimize mortality on wild stocks if the stock is below its wild management objective, but has sufficient hatchery broodstock. This would be achieved by planning to, in no case, have the fishery exceed a 10% impact on those stocks. Next slide, please. Some of the folks, and as Kelly mentioned earlier, as some here might be aware of, maybe attended some of those coastal steelhead rulemaking meetings back in the spring and are wondering how those discussions really relate to tonight's meeting. That's a great question. And while they're both very similar topics and certainly related, they are a little two separate tracks. The coastal steelhead rulemaking process is about updating our permanent regulations listed in the pamphlet and in Washington Administrative Code, or WAC. Whereas tonight's meeting is really about providing the public with information about our annual fisheries planning process with the tribes and collect feedback from you all on what you'd like to see for upcoming fisheries. Whereas the rulemaking process was initiated in early 2025 and was based on information we have covered here tonight concerning the trend and status, as well as that it had been many years since the agency had evaluated its permanent rules for coastal winter fisheries. So the department began a Fish and Wildlife Commission process to consider adjusting seasons and gear restrictions for coastal steelhead fisheries. That process, as Kelly mentioned, is still ongoing and planned to conclude with a final commission decision on those permanent regulations on November 14th in Linwood. More information on that process and those regulations in the CR 102 can be found on our website at the link provided below on your screen there. Next slide, please. And then lastly, before I turn it over to the bios and we get into the meat of tonight's discussion, I would like to go over the timeline for our annual planning process for winter steelhead fisheries with our co-managers, all leading to the signing of steelhead harvest management plans for the 2025-26 season. That annual cycle begins in the summer with exchange of the past year survey data. Technical staff work to finalize escapement estimates by the end of August, and the fall months of September and October are used for development of all the models used in forecasting those populations, and also in reaching agreement with our tribal co-managers on the upcoming year's forecast. You can see where we are on the timeline tonight, denoted by the green shading here, October 30th, with our first public town hall. The month of November is really reserved for those co-manager policy meetings to develop those harvest management plans for the upcoming year. We will have another town hall on November 20th to report back to you all on the progress of those discussions, all with the goal of finalizing those plans by early to mid-December. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Dr. Aaron Whitcock to go over South Coast. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chad. As he said, I'm the district fish biologist for the Willapa Bay. And I'll start off first with a brief overview of our river systems here. Starting in the north of the bay, we have the North River going all the way down south to the Bear River, and we have two hatcheries that release hatchery steelhead in the Willapa Bay. First, we have the Forks Creek hatchery, which releases 45,000 steelhead, and we also have the Nacelle hatchery that releases 75,000 steelhead. Next slide, please. So here we'll get into some data. We are showing the escapement and run size here for the Willapa Bay wild steelhead. Escapement are these purple bars, and the bar on top represents the impacts that occurred. And when you add them all together, you get the terminal run size. And you'll see the same format on the following slides. All the data will be in, all the graphs will be in the same format, so you'll get used to it. And this horizontal line going across is the escapement goal, which is 4206 for wild steelhead in the Willapa Bay. You can see we have met that goal, unfortunately, only 6 times in the past roughly 25 years. However, in the 2022-23 and 23-24 seasons, we were both above that goal. You can also see there is a bit of a cyclical pattern in our returns here with notable ups and downs. And one thing we're working on is trying to improve our modeling here to better forecast when these ups and downs are going to occur moving forward. All right, next slide, please. Here we have the last 3 seasons of data compiled for you to review, as well as the upcoming season forecast. And we present the wild run size forecast, the wild run size that returned, the hatchery harvest, and the estimated wild impacts. And these estimated wild impacts here are calculated based on historic CRC data when you could harvest wild steelhead, which was a while ago. But using that data, we can calculate a wild impact using using the 10% mortality rate on catch and release. So that's how this estimated wild impact column was calculated. Unfortunately, we do not have yearly creel information available for the Willapa Bay on steelhead, but we are exploring whether a creel program could be added here. You can see in the 22, 23, and 23, 24 seasons, again, we were above the escapement goal. If you compare our forecast and run size, came in higher both times than we had forecasted, which was good news. However, in 24-25, we came in significantly lower than what we had forecast. And then finally, we've got our forecast for the upcoming season for 2025-26, and we're forecasting to be above the escapement goal. We're forecasting 4,667 fish, and our forecast method utilizes a 5-year average recruits per spawner, using both returning 4- and 5-year-old fish to calculate that. So we're above our goal, which is good news. And yeah, next slide, please. Finally, I wanted to review the proposed regulation changes that we have for Willapa Bay. First, we're proposing a March 31st closure date for Bear River, Nacelle, North Nema Lower, Halix, Salmon Creek, Willapa, and South Fork Willapa. However, we are proposing an end of October closing date for systems that have a lack of available hatchery fish or have lower access, including Middle Nema Upper, North Nema Upper, Neowayacum, North River Upper, and Smith Creek. And we're also proposing selective gear rules, night closures, and barbless hook additions to be used during that time frame. And as Chad pointed out in the beginning, for more information, you can refer to our website on the CR 102 that was submitted for exact breakdowns of exactly which rules we're proposing to implement. And with that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Mike Scharf.
Good evening, everybody. I am the acting district fisheries biologist for kind of the Middle Coast, Grays Harbor, Queets, and Quinault systems. So I'm going to stick with the theme of moving from south to north. And here's a picture of a map of the Grays Harbor Basin. We do have several hatchery facilities within the Grays Harbor Basin. There are two basic populations here. We've got the hump tulips and then the chehalis. In the upper Chehalis, we have the Skookumchuck hatchery, which supplies winter steelhead for 3 release sites. One right there at the hatchery on the Skookumchuck, one in Lake Carlisle, which is located on the Newaukum River, and then the 8 Creek Acclimation Pond site that's up there near the town of Doty. There are a couple of release sites in the lower basin. There are hatchery winter steelhead released from Bingham Creek Hatchery. And there are also hatchery winter and summer steelhead that are released at several locations on the Wainuchi. Those are all reared at the Lake Aberdeen hatchery. And not appearing on this map is a small program that's started up a couple of years ago on the Wainuchi, or not the Wainuchi, the Wishkah River, by a co-op program located in the upper Wishkah River. And in the Hump Tulips River, we have the Hump Tulips hatchery. It produces both hatchery, summer and winter steelhead. Next. Again, like Dr. Whitcop showed the graph of the population. This is the Chehalis River wild population. We had a nice bump of escapement last year, the 2023-24 season. Much like we saw on other populations on the coast. But this year, the return was not very good, as you can see in the far right side of the graph. Very similar to the trend that we've seen along the coast the last 2 years. We had a pretty good return last year. This year, not so good. Next. So again, here's this table that kind of shows what's happened the last couple of years. Not much to talk about in that we were closed, but what I want to talk about here is that we got to do some krill survey work last year, and we got to learn some things. We have both projected hatchery harvest, and then based on our krill survey, we have an estimate of what we actually harvested. Not quite as many as we predicted, but that was based on a pretty high forecast, and not so many fish came back in. But on the wild side, I wanted to talk a little bit about this. We didn't have a great matrix in which to try to determine how many encounters of wild fish we would have during the proposed fisheries that we had last year. So we made a conservative assumption that every fish would be encountered at least once. And that mall suggested that we would handle over 3,000 wild steelhead during the fisheries that we put on. With our creel data that we collected this year or this past season, it suggested, well, it didn't suggest, it estimated that 530 wild steelhead were encountered. We applied that 10% mortality to those fish and estimated that 53 wild fish were killed during that fishery, where we had projected that 330 would. So we're very encouraged about having data in which to do things with, and did want to say that we do have dedicated funds to continue creel survey work should we be able to have fisheries this coming season. I think we move to the Hump Tulips Basin. Didn't see the trend that we saw the last 2 years, like we see in all the coastal tribs, but the population was still pretty low again this last year, below the goal of 1,600. But you know, we're seeing a consistent population here of about 1,200 fish. Next. And again, like the Chehalis, not many opportunities the last couple of years, but again, we had creel work that we did. And as we did in the Chehalis, we had to make some sort of estimate of wild encounters, and we used the same principle where every fish would be encountered at least once during the fishery. And we predicted that we would impact, or we would encounter 450 fish, 10% mortality there at 45 fish, wild fish dead. The data we collected estimated that 18 wild fish were killed during our fisheries last year. So we're learning a lot about our wild encounters as we move forward, and looking forward to opportunity to continue our monitoring of our fisheries as we move forward. And I think now we move into the Quinault Basin. Most of what we do in terms of management of fisheries in the Quinault is above the lake, kind of midway up the basin, and then below the forks there's a piece in there that WDFW or state gets to manage. There are 2 hatchery programs in this basin. One is at Cook Creek, a tributary below the Lake Quinault, and then there's Lake Quinault net pens. Those fish do actually migrate upstream of the lake from time to time and are encountered by fisheries up there. Again, you see the 2024 increase in population, but then this last year, a decline. And what we're looking at here is the upper basin escapement of wild fish. And the line across there is the escapement goal of 1,200 fish. But we didn't achieve that goal this past season. Next. Again, like most of the Middle Coast, no season the last couple of years, except we were able to open up some opportunity last year. We had limited creel survey in the upper Quinault Basin, but it wasn't enough to calculate any kind of harvest or wild encounters. We just didn't get enough data up there to be able to do any statistical analysis. But the preliminary catch record card data showed that 7 hatchery steelhead were harvested last year in the upper Quinault Basin. Oh, I haven't talked about the forecasts. Oops, sorry. Forecasts in the upper Quinault Basin is 1476, and you'll notice it's kind of below what has been forecasted the last few years and what has returned. That forecast is based on estimates of 1 salt fish returns and the relationship of those to 2 salt fish returns. And last year's 1 salt returns were considerably lower than they have been historically. So that forecast is kind of reflective of that, but it's still above the goal by a couple hundred fish. And all of the forecasts within the Queets, Quinault, Grace Harbor basins are preliminary. We're very close to having those finalized. There's just a few T's to cross and I's to dot to get those finalized. And I guess I should go back to the hump tulips and the Chehalis forecasts. The Chehalis forecast is 6,645. That is below the goal, but it's kind of right about where we've seen the population come in the last 3 or 4 years. And the hump tulips is again pretty close to what we've seen come back in the last couple of years. There was a pretty good return of age 3 fish, which has elevated that forecast up just a little bit, but that's why it's above the 1,200 that we've seen come back consistently over the last couple of years. Okay, now we can go back to the Quinault or the Queets, please. The Queets Basin, there is a hatchery program that comes off the Salmon River. So we have that opportunity there. Again, a little bit bump in escapement in 2024, but a decline again this last year. I think the one thing I wanted to kind of mention in this slide is that the green part, which is the harvest part of the total terminal run size, has been quite a bit smaller over the last several years, and that shows a conscious effort to reduce impacts on the wild fish by both co-managers. So I thought that was kind of important to point out. Next. Again, as I mentioned in the Quinault Basin, we were able to do some krill work this last year in the Clearwater Basin and collected some good data, but it wasn't enough to do statistical analysis on catch and encounters of wild fish. But our CRC data says or shows that 222 fish, hatchery fish, were harvested last year in the Queets Basin. Most of those probably came out of the Salmon River where that hatchery program is located. And I think the last slide is management objectives that are proposed, those changes. Want to kind of get consistent in the closure dates that we have in the Chehalis Basin. A lot of them were variable, but we're looking at a March 1st or 31st closure for the Chehalis, Clearwater, Newaukum, Upper Quinault, Satsop, Wainuchi, Skookumchuck, those systems that had that a later date. Just trying to clean that up a little bit. And some of the other systems that have the hump tulips has an early timed hatchery program. And then the West Fork, Middle Fork, Wainuchi, Hoquiam, those all don't, except for the Wishkah, which has an early timed hatchery program. They don't have hatchery releases, so we wanted to be consistent in closure dates in those areas as of the last, and have it as the last day of February. And then during certain times of the year, we're going to implement selected year rules as in addition to some of the other regulations. And I think with that, I will pass the torch off to Catherine Sutton, our North Coast Straits biologist.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I'll be discussing the Quileute and Hoh River systems tonight. And looking at this map, you see Quileute system, which includes Quileutes, Solduck, Bogachiel, Kalawa, and Dickey rivers, and the Hoh River down south. And in this area, we have 2 hatcheries with steelhead releases, the Bogachiel hatchery operated by WDFW and Shallot Creek hatchery, which is a Hoh tribal hatchery. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna begin with the Hoh River, and in looking at abundance and escapement data, while we do have a trend of decline in returns over the period of record, and looking at the most recent 10 years, we didn't meet our escapement goal just twice. Last year, we had the largest return that we've recorded. And then unfortunately this year, like in other places on the coast, we saw decreased returns. Although we did meet our escapement goal of 2,400, it was just barely. Next slide, please. And so this table presents our forecasts, our run sizes, and projected and estimated hatchery harvests and wild impacts for the past few years. And looking at the previous 3 years, 2022, 23, 23, 24 seasons, we under forecasted. This past season, the returns were lower than we had forecasted. In 2022 and 2023 and 2024, our estimated hatchery harvest is based on catch record card data, and our estimated wild impacts are based on data collected from creel surveys. And this most recent year, we were able to estimate hatchery harvest and wild impacts from our sport fishery based on creel. And we do have a preliminary agreed to forecast for next year of 3,979. We have technical agreement on that preliminarily. We have some more QA/QC to do with our tribal co-managers, but I don't expect our forecast to change by more than 6% or so. Next slide, please. Shifting over to the Quileutes, we also have a trend of declining abundance over the period of record. Although we've not met that escapement goal of 5,900 in just 3 years. Unfortunately, that includes this past season. We did not meet our escapement goal. Next slide, please. And looking at the most recent 3 years, in 22-23, our forecast was very close to what returned. And again, 2023-2024, the run was stronger, had a stronger return than we forecasted. And then this past year, that pattern flipped, and we had a lower return than we expected. 2022, 23, and 23, 24 seasons, we estimated hatchery harvest and wild impacts using catch record card data. And this past year was the first year that we had a full creel survey on the Quileute system. So we were able to estimate hatchery harvest and wild impacts in the sport fishery using that creel data. And looking to next season, we do have an agreed to forecast in the Quileute of 8,313. That's lower than the forecast that we've expected in previous years, but still enough to provide a meaningful opportunity in the sport fishery. Next slide, please. So to summarize the proposed regulation changes, we are planning on a March 31st closing date and over most systems on the coast, with the exception of the upper mainstem Hoh above Morgan's Crossing and the South Fork Hoh, which will close the last day of February. We have adjusted daily limits in some places where In previous years, we've allowed 3 hatchery steelhead. That is now reduced to 2 hatchery steelhead. And we've also proposed changes in bait restrictions. And in the permanent rules, we'll be restricting bait starting January 1st to March 31st, or the end of the season. So we will be allowing bait in December in the lower sections of Bogashio, Klawa, Dickey, Solda, Quileute, and Ho, to provide greater opportunity on hatchery steelhead. And so with that, I will hand it back to Chad.
Thank you, Catherine. And to all the staff who presented tonight, really great work. And thank you all for the work that you do. Staff were working really hard on putting this stuff together right up until right before the meeting, trying to finalize forecasts and other estimates. So thank you all for your work. So just wanted to summarize all the info tonight. As we plan for upcoming winter steelhead fisheries, a precautionary approach is warranted based on the stock's trend and status. The coastal steelhead rulemaking process will establish a new baseline for annual season expectations and will be what is reflected in our annual sport fishing pamphlet. Our annual processes with our co-managers to plan and implement winter fisheries is proceeding and on schedule. The harvest management plans that are agreed to with our co-managers may differ from what is in the permanent regulations. This would be necessary to be able to respond to either conservation issues or abundances within the annual cycle, response to really low forecasts or other things outside of the norm. These changes would be made via emergency regulation and would be announced on our website and through other means. The proposed permanent regulations contained in the CR 102 that is currently posted on our website is our starting point for negotiation with the tribes for this year. So with that, I think that takes us just about to the end. We can go to questions. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just a couple of Zoom reminders for folks here. You can ask a question by raising your hand. If you're calling in, you can raise your hand by dialing 9 on your phone. Or if you're calling from a computer, you can find the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. To speak, you will need to unmute yourself by using the mute button on your computer or mobile device, or enter *6 if you're calling from a landline. If you have a technical issue during the webinar, please drop us a note in the chat and we will help you through it as best we can. Questions in written format are accepted at the online portal listed there below. And with that, I'll look for hands. Leah?
Okay, it looks like we have a few hands up. Our first hand is from Wes. Wes, go ahead.
Yeah. Question on the queets. We didn't cover escapement goal, progress with the UW, and what will be our planning standard this year, since that's a bit ambiguous. I don't believe you've shared any assertion about the escapement goal when there's a dispute.
Yeah, thanks for that, Wes. Currently, yeah, we don't have an agreed to objective in the Queets Clearwater system. We're still working through that with our tribal co-managers. Mike, do you have any other sort of information you would add to that?
I have not heard anything recently on that subject, so no, I can't add to it.
Yeah, I know, Wes, that's been a topic that we've been trying to resolve for a number of years. We're really hopeful with some of our new creel monitoring program that we'll be able to make some progress towards looking and developing and agreeing to a management objective in that Queet system. I think where we are this year will be with our co-managers is we'll start to look at that as part of our annual harvest management plan development, and agree to something that makes sense for this year, given the forecast and the conservation need.
Yeah, I would just encourage that in the absence of an an agreed to escapement goal. We would just like to see the fishery efforts mirror one another.
Thank you, Wes.
Okay, thank you, Wes. Our next hand is from Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yep, we've got you.
Thank you all again for holding these meetings. They're very informative. I think they're a great way to speak to stakeholders and stuff like that. So again, I just want to, you've held them for like 5 years now, and I appreciate all the efforts that you've put into them. I have a couple quick questions. On slide 22, if you could go back to that. I maybe don't understand a number on it with respect to the upper Quinault. Yeah, it says upper basin, the second column, wild upper basin escapement. And if you go down to 24-25, it says 2003. Is that what the escapement was last year, or is that am I misunderstanding that?
Go ahead, Mike.
I believe that was the escapement last year.
Well, if you go back up to the next, the slide 21, that's not kind of what it shows there.
Good catch. I'm trying to pull up the forecast model as we speak to see what that run size was. And I will double check on that and make sure that we get the appropriate number in there.
Okay, yeah, I thought that might have been a miss. And the other thing on this one is that your upper basin forecast for this year preliminarily is 1476. I believe
Yes.
the escapement goal, at least I think it's agreed with the tribes, though I'm not sure this fluctuates a little bit, but it was 1200, then it went up to 1600, then it went back to 1200. So is it 1200 now?
It is 1200.
And so the upper basin forecast would be above the escapement goal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you're not in that 10% under the statewide steelhead management plan, right? You'll divide the actual amount that you are above the escapement goal between the state and the tribe. So we're not limited to that 10%. Is that correct?
That is correct. And based on the run reconstruction data that I have from the Quinaults,
Okay, I just want to make sure because it said
is a correct number.
okay, because it said down below there the projected sport impact limit is 10% shared with the tribal co-manager, but I don't think we're actually in that. So I just wanted to make sure it'll probably be about the same anyway, but I just wanted to make sure I understood that one.
Right.
And then one question on the Quileute system. Obviously, it's a big disappointment to see that drop down as much as it did, because it had been kind of doing very well. But I noticed that the projected wild impacts are consistently above, significantly above the estimated wild impacts. And I guess this year it sounds to me like this is the first year that you've done or last year was the first year that you did a full creel there, but it showed pretty much a consistent trend of the projected impacts being well above the actual impacts for the recreational fishery. And I'm just asking, is there any adjustment that you guys may be making with respect to projecting wild impacts from the recreational fishery, given that you've been over forecasting it pretty consistently here?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. That's a great question. And I'll touch on that a little bit and then turn it over to Catherine to see if I missed anything. But I think for the Quileute system and the projected wild impacts is what you're really seeing is a very conservative approach to modeling our fishery in the preseason. On previous past town halls, we had talked about in previous years, utilizing some creel work that was done a while ago to look at an impact in some of our fisheries out here. that showed a pretty high encounter ratio with wild fish in those fisheries, sometimes, touching almost every fish within the run. So we've been using that understanding in our modeling to really represent almost a maximum or a very conservative fishery input to ensure, we meet our escapement of objectives. What's really exciting for us is as we implement these creel surveys and kind of better understand, get better precision in terms of our actual impacts on the water. We're seeing that those actual impacts are a lot less than some of that projection work. So once again, making us feel pretty comfortable in our early modeling and preseason modeling to ensure we're making ensure we're meeting objectives, and then knowing that impact's coming in while much lower. And then the second part of your question is, yeah, absolutely, we want to look towards incorporating this creel work in all aspects of our run reconstruction and fishery management. But as we've touched on here, these programs are really new, and we would really like to consider continue to collect more years worth of data to really look at that annual variability, environmental conditions, different abundances, to really understand the power of our fishery across a range of those scenarios. So Catherine, tell me what I missed or fill in what I missed.
I think you got it, Chad. Thank you.
And just one real quick question. In the proposed regulations, will you have the same no fishing from a boat above, certain areas on the, like, I believe it was above the hatchery last year on the sole duck and above a certain point on the bogus shield. Will those be proposed again, or are those not going to be proposed?
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Brian. I'll look to Catherine, see if she's got the specifics. I don't think we're changing any of those, but I'll look to her for details.
No, we won't be changing boat regulations from last year.
You will be, or you won't be?
Won't be.
Won't be. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And once again, I just want to iterate what we're talking about tonight is a proposal. These are our starting points for negotiations with our co-managers. And we'll, look to finalize those plans and communicate with you all over the next few weeks as we look to finalize that work. Thanks, Brian. Great questions and keen eye.
Hey, if I may jump in to address Brian's comment about the quinault, he is correct in that the table is actually showing somehow we got the basin escapement in, not the upper quinault, but the graphs are correct.
Thanks for that clarification, Mike. We'll get that stuff updated on this presentation is available on our website, and we'll get those corrections made and that presentation updated so folks have all the up-to-date information.
Thank you, Chad. Our next hand is from Jesse. Jesse, go ahead.
Hi, how's my connection?
We've got you.
Okay, cool. I had a couple of comments. Well, first of all, are we allowed to comment on the proposed rule changes that were mentioned in passing?
Sure. I mean, you could comment on those as they are, as mentioned, they're relevant to this year's fishery planning process in what we're thinking about for this year. So yeah.
So the ones that are proposed as permanent rule changes to different watersheds are not, those haven't been finalized. They're still in processing.
That is correct. They haven't been finalized, but we have passed the public hearing for those. Was held in September, I believe. So the next step is really just a commission decision on those proposed regulations.
Okay, got it.
The comment period for that is closed.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah.
I had two in that case, like one kind of general comment and then a question following that. So the general comment would be, as we get more and more restricted and more watersheds are closing earlier, I'm sure as you guys hear all the time, it concentrates fishing pressure on the more popular fisheries, which obviously isn't good for the steelhead in the sense that it compounds the impact that they face from sportsmen. and also isn't good for the sportsmen because they're competing for space. So the general request or plea would just be that there be conversations with people in other districts aside from the coast, like the North Sound, Columbia River, like ways to open up opportunities to distribute fishermen so that our fish don't have such concentrated pressure, and also so that fishermen have more room to branch out and fish different fisheries. I feel like, a lot of the time I agree with some of the conservative measures that you guys are taking to protect the fish, but I think also a part of that is spreading anglers out so that certain rivers aren't crushed with angler pressure. And I know the coast is separate from the Sound, the North Sound, in terms of management, but if there's any way collaboration can happen there to open up fisheries on the healthier North Sound fisheries to give guys up there a chance, I think it would do loads for our coastal steelhead populations.
Thanks for that comment, Jesse.
And then the last question would be, in terms of Quinault Indian Nation, I know that co-management with them has been ongoing and has resulted in lowered opportunities for sportsmen outside of the Indian Nation to take part in those fisheries based on escapement and then sometimes other political issues. And I was curious if there have been any bids in terms of offering programs to the Quinault to compensate them for allowing people to fish on the park sections or the public sections of their rivers.
Let me make sure I understand your question, Jesse. Are you asking if we've engaged the Quinault Indian Nation in discussions about compensating them for allowing opportunity on WDFW managed fisheries or on Quinault fisheries on reservation?
On WDFW managed fisheries, I feel like oftentimes when the negotiation comes down to what is going to be open, it seems like there's a little bit of a push-pull in terms of Quinault not wanting certain fisheries open on their river because they're worried about the impacts that non-Quinault sportsmen have on those fisheries, even though they are managed by WDFW.
Okay, no, thanks, Jesse. Simple answer to your question is no, we haven't engaged in them with that. But what I would say is, both the Quinault Indian Nation and WDFW, go through this annual planning cycle to plan these fisheries. We look at what's appropriate and the trend and status and forecast and all that information, and then try and think about, what would be harvestable in a sustainable scenario moving forward. At times, those aren't easy conversations and can push and pull back and forth. But at the end of the day, I think both of us are focused on moving forward with sustainable fisheries opportunities for both our sectors, and with the appropriate monitoring in place to ensure that those fisheries meet their harvest and conservation objectives. And I think that's really been more of the keystone or the linchpin in those negotiations, is us being able to provide that monitoring and those assurances relative to our fisheries, right? CRC is difficult for us to manage with mark selective fisheries. Not impossible, but it is difficult.
Totally understood. Thank you so much for addressing that. In general, I would love to hear, like, I so appreciate, as the previous commenter said, that you guys have these meetings. And I would so love to hear, a tribal point of view, tribal management point of view on all these issues. Because I feel like so often it's hearsay for what us sportsmen hear from Quinault Indian Nation, for example. And I'm sure that you guys have already proposed this to them, or this has been talked about, but it would be really nice to hear their point of view, because I think a lot of times people get lost assuming what they are thinking or what they believe, and it would be really nice to hear from them.
No, thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that comment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. Our next hand is from Reve. Reve, go ahead.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you guys putting on this meeting. I just wanted to talk to the permanent rules, which obviously plays into this because it seems like that's kind of the baseline for what you guys are pushing for this season. But I'm a little nervous that once permanent rules are put in place, they're rarely revisited, reversed, even if things get better. And given that the Ho and the Quileute have met or exceeded escapement so many years, I feel that implementing the April closure as a permanent rule just doesn't really align with the mandate to maximize fishing opportunity. Especially now seeing this new data with the creel showing that we've historically been overestimating sport angler impacts to wild steelhead. So I just wanted to see if that is still going forward full force, because it really locks in and removes flexibility from the management process and eliminates the opportunity for adaptive decision making in the future. So can you speak to that, Chad? Is it changing? Is it going as proposed? Has that discussion come up? Specifically for those rivers that are doing better.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Reve, and I think it's a pertinent question. The quick answer to that is no. The proposed regulations that we're working through the rulemaking and the permanent regulations going through that commission process. Currently, what we have in CR 102 is what we're proposing to move forward with when we hopefully finalize those rules in November. And really, as we talked about that back in the meetings that we conducted in the spring, that's really a response to a variety of factors. And while Ho and Quileute, overall have tended to meet their escapement objectives more times than some of those rivers on the south, they're not meeting it all the time. And they certainly didn't meet it last year. There are still definitely concerns for declining trend. We have literature to suggest that some of these issues are due to ocean productivity and other things. But I think it's incumbent on us to make sure within our policies and guidance that we have to focus our fisheries on the available hatchery fish that are available and really to minimize our impact on wild fish. And while we're encouraged that our creel information does show that we're having a very minimal impact, it doesn't change the fact that as we move into April, less and less, almost none, hatchery fish become available, and those encounters are almost primarily on wild fish. Also, we've got concerns around kelts and repeat spawners and the decline in the proportion of those fish all lead us to where we are in those permanent regulations. With that being said, and I do appreciate your comments about when these things go in permanence and when they turn around, and if things turn around, it's harder for us to be able to pivot and offer that opportunity when it is available. And that can be true. That can be true. But what we're really hoping to work through with this creel information and development of new tools with the data that's available through it will help us better understand run sizes through time and be able to develop a process in which we may be able to update run sizes in season and be able to look at offering additional opportunity when it was available and when we were certain that we were within our conservation objectives. So totally get that it's harder to open than it is to close, but we're looking to really build the mechanisms and processes in which we can do that and work through that with our co-managers. So long answer, we got a lot of work to do there. Thanks, Reve.
Thank you, Reve. Our next hand is from Bob. Bob, go ahead.
The question I have is regarding I guess the permanent rules and the next year's deal. So I think she said that we were not redoing anything with the boat rules in the Quileute system. They're staying the same. Is that true in the permanent rules that they were not changing? Thought we changed to where we weren't doing the no fishing from a boat thing, and that those upper reaches were going back to normal. Is that not true? Did I miss that?
I think, Bob, we did have we had some sections of river, and I'll look to Catherine to clarify this, that did have no fishing from a floating device already in permanent regulations. I don't believe we've made any changes to those moving forward in the permanents. And Catherine, help me out for what I've got wrong.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I meant we're not changing the boat regulations from the permanent rules. So those upper sections of the Quileute will be open.
So if I could, Chad, just jump in here real quick. Can you hear me?
Yep, certainly, Kelly.
So I don't want folks to get confused. We've got a couple of different things going on here, as Chad mentioned early on. We've got our revisions to the permanent rules, those rules that'll show up in our pamphlet. And the fact of the matter is, as many of you know, for the last 5 years, we haven't been managing those fisheries based on the permanent rules. We've been using e-regulations to manage those rules and implement things like no fishing from a floating device, Bob, as you're aware. The permanent rules are going to be silent on that, but that will be a tool that may need to pull out of the box to get a fishery on the water, right? And that's all part of the negotiations with the co-managers that have really not even begun in earnest yet. Some of them have started, but we've been focused on the forecast here. So as a result of our development of those management plans, we may see rules like that show up. I'm not anticipating any at this point in time. I have no indication that that's where we're going to land, but I don't want to give folks the impression that these permanent rules that you see are going to be translated on to what's actually on the water this year, because we're just not there yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense for sure. I just was unclear of, I guess, of the response was, I thought the permanent rules that we had meetings on earlier took away the no fishing from a floating device rules. And in the last response, it didn't sound like that was the case, but we've clarified that now. So, and I do understand that when we have conservation measures, we might still utilize those tools. I just wanted to make sure that the permanent rules were not stating that.
Yeah, roger that.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Yep.
Thank you, Bob. Our next hand is from Scott. Scott, go ahead. Scott, I have sent a prompt over for you to unmute. Okay, we'll circle back to Scott. Our next hand is from Rich. Rich, go ahead.
This is Rich. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we have you.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks again for the town halls. Always appreciate the opportunity to listen in and get updated on where we're at. Always appreciate the ability to provide feedback in these forums. So they're very important to many of us, I think, when it comes to our fisheries. One of the things is just overlooking the data and the information that's been presented tonight. It seems like to me that we should be looking at a little bit more of a conservative approach this year. I appreciate the fact of you guys trying to create the permanent rules in place, and I know some folks from the Wild Steelhead Coalition did send in a document to you guys about a tiered or a dialed approach to our fisheries. And I think there's a lot of good information in there that could be of value when we shape some of our seasons and regulations. I'm really kind of concerned about some of the rivers. The upper Quinault, I'm really concerned about. You look at the trends, well, we look at the trends for most all our rivers, they're in a downward trend. And I think that's something that people need to be always thinking about instead of looking at the last 4 or 5 years and seeing, what the numbers have done, where sometimes they're good and everything, but I think the overall trends are what is the most important thing to kind of really look at when we think about how we approach some of our fisheries. And I think there should be more thought into what does a fishery look like on the Upper Quinault. I think that's a really delicate system at this point that could easily flop pretty bad for us. So we should be really thinking about progressive regulations that maybe limit impacts and interactions on the system. I do believe that we have the data from the boat study and everything that can be applied in various avenues that where it makes sense. And again, it's just also a way of managing pressure. I mean, in some respects, I mean, I think that's something that we really have to be thinking more harder about, because we're probably the most efficient and effective predator at any time, in history when it comes to this animal. And we are just so much better at catching them. And, there's less places for us to go. There's more people. The steelhead experience continues to be heavily marketed. And it's pulling people not only from our vicinity, which has two very large metropolitan areas within a 60-80 mile radius of it. And, but we have people coming from all over the West. We have people coming, I've met people that are from England fishing on the peninsula. I mean, we really have to be thinking about how all this pressure is being placed upon the fishery, and not only the fish itself, but also the experience. I mean, when you get a crowded fishery and people start behaving like they got to catch every fish in the river, it really starts impacting the etiquette of the experience as well. And I really think that's something that should be looked at. So those are my comments now. I believe that, we're kind of still out of the woods, man, and we got some things to really think about on how we approach these fisheries. I'll just leave it at that, but I look forward to engaging a little bit more, and thanks again for the information tonight.
Thank you, Rich. Our next hand is from Greg. Greg, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we've got you.
So, thanks for having this meeting, town hall. I appreciate you guys, the staff and everything. So this might be a question for Kelly, is where are we at under ESA? Has there been any petitions to list coastal steelhead? Are we at that point, or?
Yeah, but Greg, good to hear your voice. It's been a while.
Thank you.
So a couple of years ago, there was a petition to list North Coast steelhead. Noah's been looking at it for a while. We have had indications earlier in the year that we hear a determination in December. I'm not sure I'm hanging my hat on that, especially with the government shutdown. So we're still operating under the most current information we have from them, which was they would make a determination by the end of the calendar year. Problem is, we don't have anybody we can even call up and ask the question of at this point in time. They've all been furloughed. So that's what we know. When we know more, we'll share it. But there's not much to report beyond that I'm aware of anyway.
Thanks for that. I got another question. I am curious why Nacelle gets 75,000 winter steelhead, and Fort Stritch Hatchery only puts out 45,000. How come? And this is more for Chad probably. Why aren't we at equal beings there in the pot? Willpaw they both have limited access, bank angling, Willapa especially, may sell, we can use a boat there, raft, whatever. Why the difference in that basin?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Greg. As you know, our hatchery production there in Willapa Bay around steelhead has been pretty static for a long time. We're pretty excited by the new commission policy around hatchery production and working towards development of hatchery management plans for those. In terms of why it's set up that way, I really don't have a great answer for you off the top of my head. I think we could probably circle up online with Dr. Whitkop and myself and try and figure that out. But I think we're more laser focused in terms of hatchery production on having agency staff finish development of what those hatchery management plans look like, so we can get to work on Willapa and developing those for all our hatchery production within the system. So thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Chad.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And that was our last hand besides Scott. And we're going to try Scott again. Scott, go ahead.
Hello, good evening. Hello?
Hi.
We got you.
We got you.
Okay, great. Hey, I hope this isn't off topic, but every year it seems to, or not every year, but it seems to be a kind of a foregone thing in the late run coho on the Chehalis system and the Southsup. And so I guess I got a couple of questions, and maybe don't answer them right yet, but I was wondering what percentage of wild steelhead do you guys have figured out to return in the month of December on the Southsup and Chehalis system? That'd be one of my questions. And then obviously I'm my focus here is on being able to be on the water in December. And it seems to me that with the lack of effort in December for those coho, combined with the amount of days that we're actually able to get on the water in the month of December, it's maybe half the month, maybe. And it just seems to me like more priority should be put towards maybe fighting for that opportunity. It was put to me one year that the tribe wasn't comfortable with having a fishery on the Southsup for the bee run coho. And I just kind of wanted to bring it up now and start the conversation on it. I hope that my call will motivate WDFW as well as other listeners to be motivated to keep this in sight, because for so many years now we've just lost that, and it seems to be like a side note. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks, Scott. Not really here for coho fisheries tonight, but do appreciate the intersection between coho and steelhead fisheries, especially given you were talking about the Southsup and the Chehalis. We do need some steelhead impacts to be able to prosecute coho fisheries, as I think you alluded to in your comments there. There are very minimal steelhead encounters in the month of December when those coho fisheries are open, but there are some, and we've got data to document that. I think relative to this year and what's on the table currently, I think currently the Chehalis system, and I'll look to Mike to make sure I'm right here, is scheduled to be open through the month of December for coho opportunity. And the current proposed steelhead regulations that we're discussing for this year would not change that. There would be no closure during the month of December. So, Mike, did what I say is accurate?
That is correct. Nice job.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And that was our last hand for right now. Just a reminder for folks on the phone, *6. Raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. It might be a reactions tab if you have a different version you're running. And we have a hand up from Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Thanks. I'll just add a comment here. Going back to I guess the proposed permanent regulations and also the regulations for this year and the lack of opportunity in April with respect to specifically the Quileute and the hoe system. I recognize you guys are, we're pretty close to our escapement goals, and of course we fell below it on the Quileute, so you want to be conservative, and I appreciate that. One of the things I've been, I guess, harping on for about 30 years is to balance impacts across the entire run timing. And I think it was a problem much more acute in decades past, where we had a lot of impacts on the early part of the run timing versus the later. But I still see that as somewhat of an issue that I hope you guys will take into consideration. There are still, bright fish coming in April. Those early fish that come in, they get pressure on them for a lot longer in the recreational fishery, of course, even though they go through the tribal fishery, and I think they're netting more days per week the early part of the run anyway. So I do think there's a need to take into consideration how our impacts are distributed across the run timing. In addition to, I hate to see us lose all of April for recreational opportunity. And just to speak to one point, all of our fisheries on the Quileute, and I think on the hoe too, maybe not so much on the hoe. I'm not sure what kind of stock they're using there on the hoe, but after about mid-January, we're not fishing on hatchery fish. Our fishery is a directed catch and release fishery on wild fish. So the rationale that, we got to close April because there's no more hatchery fish out there, that doesn't fly as far as a rationale for me. Anything in February, March, it's a directed catch and release fishery for that. So I'll let that go. Those are my comments, but I would appreciate it if you could, take a look at on the Celts. Is it going to make any difference at all when you model it out? I think that's important to take a look at as well. If we need to close it because of the Celts, I get it. But if it's not going to make any difference, I'd like to see if maybe some April could stay open, and maybe some more conservative regulations earlier in the year could be put in place. My last comment, I guess, would be just a question. What's the rationale for closing the hoe from Morgan's up to the park line at the end of February? Is it a concern about our overall impacts, or is there something unique to that stretch of river? Are fish starting to spawn up there at that point? I'm just trying to understand what the rationale, because it's a nice, beautiful piece of river to float in March. I'll tell you what, from the park down. And I hate to lose that opportunity. So I'm just kind of curious what the rationale for that is, both in this year's regulations and also as proposed in the permanent regulations. And again, I thank you again for all your time and effort to have these meetings. I do appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Brian, and thanks for your comments. Really appreciate them, and poignant as always. Thinking about how we're impacting these fish, early time, late timed, all that is definitely something that we're interested in, and really hoping to be able to understand more as we get more data from this from our pretty robust active monitoring creel programs. And I know, with that, there's lots of pretty smart folks who are looking at that data and want to develop, some of those tools and understand some of those questions that you raise. And hopefully, armed with better information, we can continue to fine tune our management to meet those shared objectives that we all have for sustainability. The second part of your question, you asked specifically about some of those sections on the upper section of the hoe and why we were dialing that back a little bit. I'll give it a go first and then look to Catherine to help clean up anything that I mess up. But I think as we look at that, the hoe is really a unique system relative to the rest of these coastal systems. Most of those, we've got pretty robust hatchery production, and it occurs, higher up in the drainages, providing a lot of hatchery fish up and down the system. In the case of the Ho, right, we've got just a tribal facility that's located very low in the system. So the majority of our fishery, as you noted in your comments about other systems, is really a directed catch and release fishery. And I think with that and the number and the effort that we see there, some of this new monitoring information has kind of shown us that, while some of these systems, specifically in the last few years, we've dealt with pretty low conditions in some of them. And quite frankly, some of them have been unfloatable. And some of the upper sections of the Ho have still been able to be floatable. And so that has resulted in a little more effort in the Ho than we thought maybe actually occurred. We're seeing pretty high encounters with wild fish. So all that, suffice it to say, I think the answer is twofold. One, we're concerned about the number of total impacts or encounters we're having on the total population with the Ho and feel like a precautionary approach is necessary. And then two, trying to provide as much protection as possible for where fish are spawning later on. And so I'll look to Catherine to see if there was any other considerations there or something I missed.
You got it, Chad. I'll just add that above Morgan's Crossing is sections where we see some of the highest densities of spawning in the main stem. And so it's an important spawning area, and the last day of February closure is just trying to find that balance between opportunity and where we can really mitigate our impacts on the wild fish.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, and
thanks for your comments, Brian.
Thanks for your answers. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Our next hand is from Guy. Guy, go ahead.
Hey, good evening. I have a question for Chad and probably Catherine. We kind of glossed over the floating device issue, particular to the Ho. So can you remind me, I know it's getting late, but can you remind me what are the permanent rules? I wasn't clear on what those are for fishing from a floating device on the Ho. And if is this an extension of that original 1-year study? Are those now the permanent rules for a floating device on the Ho?
Yeah, I'll probably kick that over to Catherine pretty quickly so I don't get over my skis, but I think generally we're not making any changes to where we've had no fishing from a floating device for the Ho, and no, not a continuation of the study, but I'll look to Catherine to fill in details.
So in the permanent rules, there's no fishing from a floating device above Morgan's Crossing, and we're gonna maintain that in the permanent rules.
How about from Morgan's down?
We will allow
Knoxville?
fishing from a floating device.
Okay, so but this was the design, the I think it was like a Tuesday to a Sunday to Tuesday, then a Wednesday to Saturday. I'm trying to remember the details. Those were part of that experiment, right? Is that how that came to fruition?
Correct. And even in that period where we were conducting that boat fishing study, Morgan's Crossing above the section above Morgan's Crossing was completely closed to fishing from a floating device. So that is maintained this year.
Okay, and hopefully, there was some really good information being derived from that in terms of effectiveness of the different types of fishing. Hopefully there's creel being done so we can still collect that information. Is that going to happen with having the floating device allowance on the Ho?
Yeah, we will continue a full creel on the Ho River. And yeah, I believe our fish science division is working on wrapping up the boat fishing study right now.
Okay, yeah, it's getting late. We can talk more about this. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Guy.
Okay, our next hand is from Jonathan. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. How's it going? Jonathan Stump here. Thanks for hosting these meetings. It's always good to hear what's going on. I have a couple questions tonight. The first one has to do with the straight and independent streams. And those have not been really covered in this presentation nor during the permanent rulemaking process. And so kind of curious where the agency is right now with the consideration for the management of those streams. It seems like even in previous leadership, those were just cast to the side and not even considered or discussed. And then my second question here, and I'll get to the third one after I've given you time to respond, has to do with aligning regulations with Olympic National Park. And I'm curious if you guys have had any discussions with ONP during the permanent rulemaking process, and then kind of what your plans are for now, especially as we're dealing with both the government shutdown, but a departure of a significant amount of staff at the national park.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So two questions, one about independent straight streams and their management, and the other about alignment with Olympic National Park for whatever regulations we move forward with this year. So relative to the first question, I'll just say, yeah, we're absolutely we care about those independent straight streams and those populations. I think this is really about just taking all this in bite-sized chunks. Going through a rulemaking like this on top of all our just day-to-day work is a significant workload. We've been a little understaffed here recently with some vacancies. We're finally starting to get those positions filled and get back up to full speed here. So I think over time, you'll see us, kind of take a systematic approach across the region and likely maybe even across the state to looking at some of these things and updating those given current seasons. And then on the Olympic National Park discussions, yeah, that's going to be a difficult one. I don't got a total answer for you right now. I do have a contact at Olympic National Park in which to have these sort of conversations. Haven't started engaging them yet, as I was kind of waiting for the co-manager conversations to get a little farther down the road and provide a little more certainty before we started engaging in that. But I think the government shutdown is definitely going to complicate that situation, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to unfold, quite frankly.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And then I guess my last question kind of takes into consideration everything that we've been hearing tonight, right? There's just, we go through this process every year. We try to set the seasons as best possible while balancing the conservation with the opportunity. We have this rulemaking process. We have all these comments that come in, and the kind of the theme that I pull together out of all these comments is just consistency, right? And there doesn't seem to be any consistency, and we have the tools at hand to get us to that point. We have the statewide steelhead management plan, and I appreciate you recognizing that at the beginning of the call. It is something that was, I don't believe, mentioned once during the overall rulemaking process. And the regional management plans, right? We need to be moving in the direction of getting those developed so we can get a fisheries management plan in place, so we don't have to sit here and talk about, like, how do we get our days back in April, or why can't we have a fishery in this particular area, right? And as designed within the Coastal Steelhead Proviso Plan from a couple of years ago, the management strategy evaluation and integrated population modeling. Right. So I don't know, Chad, I know that, you're in this role 10 months now, 11 months now, so I don't expect you to have all the answers, but, maybe someone else could answer to where we are in that process with developing the RMPs.
Awesome. No, thanks, Jonathan, and appreciate that follow-up. I mean, it sounds like you're standing here next to me and reading off our to-do list relative to steelhead. Regional long-term management plans are something absolutely we'd love to work on with our co-managers and get finalized and provide some of that consistency and long-term assurance. I think we're doing that the best we can with the tools that we have right now, knowing that these tools are going to continue to bear fruit. You referenced things like the IPM, the MSE. Those are all things that, we're kind of working on in the background. Don't have any, huge announcements or developments at this point in time to share, but know that that's work that's ongoing with the co-managers. And we hope to have, more conversations about what that stuff looks like and the tools that we develop and all that moving forward. But, that's going to take time. These are long-term issues and discussions, and we're trying to tick them off one by one. And really, as we looked about it, the first step here was like fixing our own house, right? Getting our own rules up to date with where we need to be, and then we can start engaging other folks around those long-term conversations. But really, we felt like here it starts with us, and so that's where we're at right now. So thanks, Jonathan.
Yep, appreciate it.
Okay, our next and last hand for the moment is Jacob. Jacob, go ahead.
Hey guys, just wanted to say thank you for putting this together. A few people have commented on that. It's been going on for a few years now, and I think it's a great opportunity for different anglers from different walks of life to share their opinions on the steelhead fishery we all cherish and you guys are managing. It's hard work and we appreciate it. I think there's been a lot of very good comments and questions raised tonight. And I'm looking forward to see how you guys are going to try to address many of them. I just had a couple of quick comments, mainly some of them pertaining to maybe the next meeting. If you guys could share some more the data from like the Hoh River boat study, some of the intensive creel work that's been done on the Hoh. I'm assuming some of that's been queried and looked at as far as some of the questions we were trying to answer then. Perhaps also maybe query some of the VTR data we have going on North Coast. I think that could be further expanded even to other regions or places in Region 6, and could be a cool tool for anglers in the state to collaborate and better understand our steelhead fisheries. And then just lastly, wondering if there's been any thoughts about utilizing gear type specific regulations as a means to provide opportunity, because we do have data on the CPUE of different fishing methods for steelhead. And I think that might be a cool way to provide opportunity if we maybe think outside the box there. And that would be complicated, obviously, for many reasons, but just throwing that out there as a thought. That's all I have. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Jacob. Appreciate that, those comments. Yeah, we're always looking to develop new tools and understand things better. Folks in our science division are laser focused on continuing to work with this creel data and help build tools, referencing the integrated population model that Jonathan brought up earlier, as well as the management strategy evaluation piece that we're looking to go through. Relative to the no fishing from a boat study, I think Catherine touched on that earlier. Our science division folks are working through the process to publish that data. I doubt it will be available and finished by November 20th, but once that data is published, it will be available and out to everyone on our website and in whatever journal they're looking to publish that information on. And then secondly, the other piece was tools relative to our creel and finalizing that. We're currently undergoing and staff are working on finalizing and publishing those creel results. It starts with a methods manual, and that's really based on our tulips creel. That manuscript's going to be about 45, 50 pages and really sets the methods for the rest of these creel programs. And then we should be publishing successive reports that are able to cite all the methods in that initial report and be much more succinct and provide everyone with the final estimates resulting from these annual creel programs. We're working on that. It takes some time to get all that stuff up and done, and through our internal processes, as well as through co-manager review before we publish those documents. So that's something we're currently working on, but no timeline in sight for publication. Thanks, Jacob.
Good information. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it. Good luck with co-management discussions, and looking forward to what you guys bring to the table for us.
Thank you, Jacob. And that was our last hand. Just a reminder, *9, you want to raise your hand?
Well, I think I'd just kind of like to take this moment to really thank everybody for coming out tonight, even on the somber occasion with the news that Kelly shared early on. I think we can all be touched by that news, and just want to offer whatever we can to the people, and thoughts and prayers to their families. Also, just want to recognize the number of people that have turned out for this meeting tonight. I think we were well over 100. And so that's just really exciting in terms of the engagement that we're getting from the public on these, in planning these fisheries. And so we're really excited just to work with you all and hear your thoughts and opinions. And so thanks.
Yeah, if I could just jump in real quick, Chad. If folks are interested, just want to make sure you're aware regarding the permanent rules. If you're able to tune into the commission meeting, I think it's week after next, 14th through the 16th or something like that. Whatever that, I guess it's the 13th, 14th, and 15th. On the 13th in the afternoon, Fish Program will be visiting with the Fish Committee, giving them a briefing on the rule package. And then on Friday, and I don't have, the agenda is not finalized, but there will be an agenda item on that Friday where we're going to be asking the commission for a decision, and they'll have an opportunity to either adopt what we present, or they may have other ideas. So if you're interested, tune in. And again, just to double down on what Chad said, thanks for taking time out of your evenings on a Thursday night. Appreciate y'all being here. Appreciate the good feedback and the comments, and hope everybody has a great evening, and stay safe out there, everybody. Take care.
Thank you all.